Hello everyone and welcome back to Channel Fear Pines. Tonight we are driving the Pacific Coast Highway after dark, where fog erases the next turn, waves hammer the rocks below, and a simple roadside stop can leave no witness behind. These stories come from people who traveled, worked, and lived along this beautiful, unforgiving coast. Names and details have been changed, but the accounts are real. Subscribe to Fear Pines and turn on the notification bell. Then settle in and keep your eyes on the road. Claire Morgan kept a small paper bag of orange peels in the cup holder of her Subaru. She said the smell helped her stay awake after a night shift. Her co-workers at Monterey General teased her about it, but Claire never threw the bag away until she reached home. By then, the peels had dried into thin curls, and the car smelled faintly of citrus and hospital soap. She had worked in the emergency department for almost 9 years. She knew which vending machine made the least noise, which stairwell stayed warm in winter, and which security guard kept peppermints in his breast pocket. On quiet mornings, she called her mother from the hospital parking lot before driving south. Her mother lived in Salinas and always asked the same question. "Did you eat?" Claire always lied. That morning, she had eaten half a turkey sandwich at 3 in the morning. She had saved the other half in a foil wrapper, then forgotten it beside a stack of discharge papers. Her feet hurt inside her white sneakers. Her hair was tied up with a blue elastic that had lost its stretch. She carried a dented thermos filled with coffee she no longer wanted. The sun was still below the hills when she left the hospital. Monterey sat behind her in a wash of streetlights and low fog ahead. Highway 1 curved toward Big Sur, following the dark edge of the Pacific. Claire liked that part of the drive. It took longer than the inland route, but the ocean kept her company. On clear mornings, she could see pelicans gliding over the water. Sometimes she stopped at a turnout and watched fishermen preparing their boats far below. She had once told a coworker that the coast made her feel as if the world had been emptied out for a few miles. That morning, the world felt empty in a different way. The tires made a soft, steady sound over the pavement. Wind moved through the cracked window seal and whistled near her left ear. The radio struggled to hold a station. A weather report came and went beneath layers of static, dense fog along the central coast. The announcer repeated the warning twice. Then the signal disappeared. Claire turned the radio off. She preferred hearing the car, the engine, the tires. The faint rattle in the passenger door that had started after she clipped a concrete barrier the previous winter. She drove with both hands resting low on the steering wheel. The road was mostly clear, but the fog thickened as she passed the first series of cliffs. It reached over the asphalt in loose gray folds. Headlights from oncoming cars appeared as pale smears, then vanished behind her. Claire slowed before every curve. She knew this highway well enough to recognize its moods. Some mornings it opened wide and bright. Other mornings it held the road close and gave nothing back. At a turnout near Point Sur, she stopped to stretch her legs. The wind pressed cold against her scrubs. Below the guardrail, the surf struck the rocks with a deep, regular boom. She could not see the water, but she could hear where it was. Claire checked her phone. One message from her mother waited on the screen. She put the phone away and looked toward the road. No headlights, no taillights, just fog sliding across the pavement. She returned to the car. The orange peels shifted in the cup holder as she pulled away. One dry strip lifted on the air from the vent and landed against the gear selector. Claire picked it up at the next straightaway and placed it back in the bag. It was a small thing. She did not like leaving pieces of anything loose in the car. The road climbed and narrowed. Cypress branches leaned over the shoulder. Their shapes appeared and disappeared as the fog moved. The ocean remained somewhere to her right, hidden behind the drop in the pale curtain of mist. Near Bixby Bridge, Claire noticed a sound beneath the tires. It was not loud, it came and went with the curves. A faint tapping from the passenger side, almost like a fingernail touching glass. She glanced at the mirror. The back seat was empty except for a folded hospital blanket and a grocery bag containing 2 apples. She had meant to return the blanket to work. The apples had been there for 3 days. The tapping stopped. Claire drove on. Bixby Bridge appeared suddenly, its stone arches rising through the fog. The bridge looked incomplete at first. Only the nearest section was visible, suspended above the white air. The rest emerged as she approached, dark and solid with the ocean concealed beneath it. A person stood on the shoulder before the entrance. Claire saw the shape before she saw the clothing, a narrow figure facing away from traffic. One hand rested on the railing. The other hung at her side. Claire pressed the brake. The woman wore a pale coat that reached below her knees. Her hair was dark and loose, moving slightly in the wind. She stood too close to the edge. There was no vehicle nearby, no hazard lights, no backpack, no one else on the road. Claire slowed to a crawl. She knew the local advice. Do not stop on the bridge unless there is an emergency. Do not approach people standing near the railing. Call it in and keep moving. But the woman turned her head. Not all the way, just enough for Claire to see one side of her face. Claire pulled onto the narrow shoulder. The passenger door opened before Claire could unlock it. The woman stepped inside. She did not hurry. She folded herself into the seat with her knees together and closed the door using both hands. The movement was careful, almost polite. Cold air filled the car for a moment, carrying the smell of wet stone and seaweed. Claire kept her hands on the wheel. Are you hurt? The woman looked toward the windshield. Her face was pale but not wet. There was no dirt on the coat, no visible injury. Please keep driving, she said. Her voice was quiet. It had the flat tone of someone speaking after a long illness. Claire looked back toward the bridge. The railing was empty. Fog pressed against the stone arches. She could not see where the woman had been standing. Where do you need to go? The woman did not answer. Claire eased the car forward. She kept the speed below 30 miles an hour. The woman sat with her hands folded in her lap. Her fingers were narrow and still. A drop of water slid from her coat sleeve onto the seat. Claire noticed the seatbelt hanging beside her. You should buckle up. The woman turned her head a little. I do not like the sound it makes. Claire left it alone. For the next few minutes, neither of them spoke. The car filled with small sounds. The heater clicked as it changed temperature. The rearview mirror trembled over a rough patch of pavement. Somewhere under the dashboard, a plastic panel buzzed and stopped. The woman watched the fog. Claire tried to see her reflection in the side window, but the glass showed only darkness and a faint outline of her own face. She could not make out the woman's reflection at all. Are you from around here? Claire asked. The woman lifted one shoulder. Do you have a phone? No. Do you want me to call someone? No. Claire glanced at her hands again. The woman wore no rings. Her nails were clean and cut short. A thin gray mark crossed one knuckle like an old scar. The road descended toward a series of pullouts. Claire considered stopping at the next one. She could call the highway patrol and tell them she had picked up a stranded pedestrian. She could turn around and take the woman to a gas station. The woman spoke without looking at her. Do not stop until the fog ends. Claire felt the muscles in her right shoulder tighten. She had not told the woman where she planned to stop. The fog grew thicker. It covered the road in front of them, turning the headlights into two dull circles. Claire lowered her speed. The woman remained still beside her. Then the tapping began again. This time it came from the passenger window. 3 soft touches, a pause, 3 more. Claire stared at the road. The woman raised her eyes toward the glass. Do you hear that? Claire asked. The woman nodded. What is it? The woman placed one hand against the door. Someone wants to come in. Claire looked at the window. There was nothing outside but fog. The tapping continued. The sound moved lower from the glass to the metal beneath it. 3 touches, a pause. 3 more. Claire's phone vibrated in the center console. She flinched and reached for it at the next straight section. The screen showed her mother's name. She answered through the car's speaker. Hi, Mom. For several seconds, there was only static. Then her mother said, Claire, where are you? On Highway 1, I am almost home. The woman turned toward the dashboard. A second voice came through the speaker. It was a woman's voice, low and close to the microphone. Please keep driving. Claire gripped the steering wheel. Her mother began speaking again, but the words broke apart beneath the static. Claire caught only fragments. Bridge, not alone. Do not. The call dropped. Claire tried to dial back. Her phone displayed no service. The woman beside her pressed her palm harder against the door. The tapping stopped. A vehicle appeared behind them. Its headlights were dim and yellow. It followed at the same distance through every curve. When Claire slowed, it slowed. When she accelerated, it stayed behind her. She could not see the make or model. Is that your car? Claire asked. The woman did not turn around. Claire checked the mirror again. The vehicle had no visible license plate. Its headlights seemed too far apart for a normal sedan and too low for a truck. She passed a turnout without stopping. The woman whispered, "Good." Claire's mouth had gone dry. She reached for the thermos, but her hand shook before it touched the lid. She left it where it was. At the next bend, a small wooden sign appeared through the fog. The letters were faded and difficult to read. Claire recognized the name of an old access road that had been closed for years. The woman leaned forward. "Turn there. That road is closed." "Turn there." Claire kept driving. The woman's head snapped toward her. It was the first sudden movement she had made. "You said you would take me home." "I never said that." The woman looked through the windshield. Her face had lost what little color it held. The road behind them remained empty. Claire checked the mirror. The yellow headlights were gone. She expected relief to loosen her shoulders. Instead, she saw two pale lights reflected in the rear window of the car. They hovered above the folded blanket, close enough to seem inside the back seat. Claire did not turn around. The woman beside her began to hum. The tune had only 4 notes. Claire recognized it after a moment. It was an old lullaby her mother used to sing when Claire was a child. The woman stopped humming. "Your mother does not know you are here," she said. Claire's hands tightened around the wheel. "How do you know my mother?" The woman stared at the bridge railing visible through the fog. She called the hospital. Claire's phone vibrated again. The screen showed an incoming call from her mother. Claire did not answer. The car passed beneath a stand of cypress trees. Branches scraped lightly against the roof. The sound moved from front to back, then returned. The woman's coat dripped onto the floor. A small dark puddle formed beneath her shoes. Claire looked down for half a second. The shoes were bare. The woman had no shoes on her feet. Claire lifted her eyes to the windshield. The road curved sharply left. Beyond the guardrail, the fog opened for an instant. Claire saw the ocean. Far below, near the rocks, a pale figure stood in the surf. It wore the same coat. Claire pressed the brake. The woman beside her turned to face her fully. Her eyes were dark and tired. Her lips moved, but the words did not come from her mouth. They came from the back seat. "Do not let her out." Claire's foot came off the brake. The Subaru crossed the center line. An oncoming truck sounded its horn, one long blast that filled the car and shook the windows. Claire pulled back into her lane, corrected the wheel, and continued through the curve. The folded hospital blanket slid from the back seat. Something beneath it struck the rear window. Claire heard a dull knock, then another. She did not look. The woman reached for the passenger door handle. "Where are you going?" Claire said. The woman kept her hand on the handle. "You stopped for me. I can take you to a station." "There is no station. There is one near the next town." The woman looked at Claire's face. "You passed it." Claire knew she had not. She had driven fewer than 10 minutes since the last turnout. The fog shifted. A green road sign appeared ahead, listing a town that should have been nearly an hour away. Claire's odometer showed that only a few miles had passed since Bixby Bridge. She blinked and looked again. The sign was gone. The woman opened the door. Wind tore into the car. Claire reached across and grabbed her sleeve. The fabric felt cold and heavy, as if it had been soaked through. The woman turned her head toward the open air. Behind the car, the tapping started again. This time it came from every window. Claire pulled onto the shoulder. The tires crunched over loose gravel. The woman stepped out. For 1 second, she stood beside the car with the door open and fog curling around her waist. Claire saw the bridge railing behind her. The woman was standing on the wrong side of it. Her feet rested on the narrow outer ledge above the drop. Claire lunged across the seat and caught her wrist. The wrist was thin and cold. The skin felt smooth beneath Claire's fingers with no pulse. The woman looked down toward the water. "Do not hold me," she said. Claire pulled harder. The woman's coat slipped from her shoulder. Underneath, she wore a pale hospital gown, the same kind Claire had seen on patients who arrived by ambulance. The back of the gown was dark with seawater. A horn sounded behind them. Claire looked into the side mirror. The yellow headlights were inches from her rear bumper. There was no road between them and the vehicle. Claire pulled the woman back into the car. The door slammed shut. The headlights vanished. For several seconds, Claire heard only the engine and her own breathing. The woman lay across the passenger seat with her face turned toward the window. Claire drove. She did not stop again until she reached a cluster of lights near Carmel. The fog thinned over the inland hills. Gas stations opened along the road. A delivery truck passed in the opposite direction. The ocean disappeared behind houses and trees. Claire glanced at the passenger seat. It was empty. The seat belt hung untouched. The dark puddle on the floor. Matt had dried into a gray stain. One strand of wet hair lay across the fabric. Claire pulled into a gas station and parked beneath the brightest light. She sat there with the engine running, while an attendant watched from behind the window. Her phone showed 3 missed calls from her mother. The last message said, "I heard a woman asking for you." Claire called back. Her mother answered on the first ring. "Where are you?" "At a gas station." "Are you alone?" Claire looked at the passenger seat. Yes, her mother was quiet for a while. Then she said, "I called the hospital because I had a bad feeling." "A woman answered your phone." Claire closed her eyes. "What did she say?" "She said you had stopped for her." Claire did not tell her mother about the bridge. She did not describe the gown, the bare feet, or the hand with no pulse. She only said she was tired and would be home soon. At home, Claire showered before going to bed. She washed her hands twice. The scent of wet stone stayed beneath her fingernails. For 3 weeks, she took the inland route. She removed the orange peel bag from the cup holder and placed it in the trash. The next morning, she found a fresh strip of peel resting beside the gear selector. She threw it away again after that. She stopped carrying oranges. Claire still drove Highway 1 when daylight was strong and the sky was clear. She never crossed Bixby Bridge alone. If fog gathered around the arches, she turned around before reaching the first curve. She also began checking the passenger seat before starting the engine. Not once, 3 times. People who live beside the ocean learn that distance can hide more than darkness does. A figure near a railing may be a stranded traveler, a memory, or a shape the fog has carried from somewhere else. The road does not explain which one you saw. It only keeps moving beneath your tires. Years later, Claire still leaves a space beside her when she drives at night. She keeps the seatbelt pulled across it, flat and ready. When the window receives 3 soft taps, she does not look toward the sound. She reaches for the door lock. Then she checks the empty seat once more. Daniel Reyes kept a socket wrench in the pocket of every jacket he owned. He said it was because he hated looking for tools, but his wife knew the real reason. Daniel liked the weight of it. The cold steel gave his hand something to close around whenever he had to wait. He had worked for Big Sur Recovery for 12 years. The company had 1 flatbed truck, 2 heavy wreckers, and a narrow office beside a tire shop in Monterey. Daniel drove the older wrecker, a dark blue Kenworth with a cracked radio speaker and a heater that worked only on the highest setting. Every morning before his shift, he made 2 eggs in a cast-iron pan and ate them standing at the kitchen counter. He never used a plate. His daughter, Marisol, had once drawn a small yellow sun on the pantry door beside his name. Daniel left it there even after the rest of the family had painted over the old marks. His wife packed his lunch in the same metal container she had used when they were newly married: rice, beans, and whatever meat was left from dinner. She always tucked in a folded napkin with a red chili painted on the corner. "Bring the container back," she would say. Daniel always did. He left home before sunrise and stopped at a bakery in Carmel Valley. The baker, a woman named June, kept a sweet roll behind the counter for him. Daniel never asked for it. She simply placed it in a paper bag beside his coffee. "You look tired," June told him one morning. "I look like a tow truck driver. That is what tired looks like." He took the bag and smiled. His work began with ordinary calls: flat tires, dead batteries, tourists who locked their keys inside rental cars, drivers who misjudged the curves and ended up with one wheel in the dirt. Daniel knew how people sounded on the phone. Some apologized too much. Some became angry at the road. Some whispered as if the coast could hear them. The calls became different after midnight. At that hour, the highway belonged to wind, surf, and the few vehicles that had a reason to be moving. Daniel kept the radio low while he drove south. His dispatcher, Lena Park, worked from the office in Monterey. She was 26, studied marine biology at community college, and could identify a vessel by its running lights from half a mile away. Lena sent him the location, the vehicle description, and the caller's number. Then she stayed on the line until he arrived. She did not like the Big Sur section after 1 in the morning. Too much fog, she said, and too many places for a car to disappear. Daniel laughed the first time she said it. Lena did not. The first light appeared in late November. Daniel had received a call about a disabled sedan near a turnout south of Gorda. The driver was a man from Arizona who had overheated his rental car and decided to walk toward the nearest payphone. Daniel found the sedan empty. Its hood raised steam drifting through the headlights. The surf struck the rocks below the turnout. The sound came upward in heavy bursts. It reached the road as a dull vibration through the soles of Daniel's boots. He opened the radiator cap and waited. Behind him, the radio hissed. Lena was asking if he had located the driver. Daniel lifted the handset. "Vehicle is here. Driver is walking north." A long crackle answered. Then Lena said, "There is a light below you." Daniel looked over the guardrail. At first, he saw only fog. It filled the space between the highway and the water, thick enough to hide the cliffs. The ocean should have been far below. He could hear it, but he could not see it. Then a warm yellow light moved beneath the fog. It was small, about the size of a porch lamp seen from a distance. It traveled slowly from left to right, parallel to the shore. Daniel leaned against the railing. The light paused. It seemed to hang in the same place, just below the level of the road. There was no boat horn, no engine, no beam reaching through the fog, only a steady amber glow moving where nothing should have been able to move. Daniel stepped back. The driver returned 10 minutes later, waving a flashlight. He had walked nearly 2 miles in the wrong direction. "Thought I saw a boat down there," the man said. Daniel looked toward the water. The light was gone. He repaired the sedan and drove back toward Monterey. He did not mention the light to Lena. He told himself it had been a reflection from a distant vessel. The coast was full of odd angles. Fog could place a thing where it did not belong. The next week, a motorcyclist went over the edge. The call came at 2:17 in the morning. A woman had watched the motorcycle leave the road near a narrow bend. She said the rider had not swerved. He had simply continued forward through the guardrail. Daniel arrived before the highway patrol. The wind had dropped. Without it, the coast sounded wrong. No leaves moved. No insects called from the brush. The only noise came from the surf below and the steady ticking of the motorcycle's cooling engine. The bike had stopped on a shelf of rocks several yards down. The rider was alive but trapped beneath it. Daniel secured the winch line and began lowering a rescue harness. Lena stayed on the radio. "Do you have visual?" she asked. "Motorcycle and rider located. Any witnesses?" One woman. "She is waiting by her car." The woman's voice came through the open window of her vehicle. She kept saying the same thing. He was following it. Daniel paused. "Following what?" She pointed toward the fog below. A yellow light glowed beneath the cliff. It moved slowly along the shoreline. The woman said it had appeared before the motorcycle left the road. She had seen it between the trees below the guardrail. The rider had stopped, looked over, and then driven straight ahead. Daniel finished the rescue without looking down again. The motorcyclist survived. He remembered seeing a light under the fog. He could not say whether it had been near the water or beside the road. After that, Daniel began keeping a notebook in the wrecker. He wrote down locations, times, weather, and the condition of each vehicle. He did not write the word light. Instead, he marked the margins with a small circle. By January, there were 6 circles. Each one matched a call involving a vehicle that had left the highway or stalled in a place where no one could explain why it had stopped. A couple in a rented van found their doors unlocked and their belongings arranged on the roadside. A fisherman drove through a barrier near Lucia and told officers he had been trying to avoid a boat crossing the lane. A young man abandoned his car at a turnout and walked barefoot toward the water. Search crews found his shoes beside the driver's door. Daniel worked all those calls. The light appeared every time. Sometimes it was far below the road. Sometimes it rested just beyond the fog, close enough to cast a yellow reflection on the underside of the guardrail. Once, Daniel saw it pass behind a cliff face and emerge on the other side without changing speed. He stopped telling himself it was a boat. Lena started asking questions. "Are you seeing something down there?" Daniel kept his eyes on the road. Seeing what? A light. Could be a vessel. There are no vessels in that section. Then it is a house. There are no houses below the road. The radio fell quiet. Daniel knew Lena had checked. She checked everything. In March, a storm washed debris across the highway. Daniel spent the afternoon pulling branches from the lane while rain struck his helmet and ran down the back of his neck. That evening, he came home with wet socks and a headache. Marisol had left a note beside his dinner. "Do not forget school on Thursday." Daniel placed the note in his wallet. He ate the rice his wife had covered with foil and listened to the weather report from the kitchen radio. The forecast called for clear skies along the coast by morning. At 10:30, Lena called. A sedan had stopped near a maintenance gate south of Point Sur. The driver reported that the road ahead was blocked by a person standing in the lane. When he got out to look, the person had vanished. The sedan would not start. Daniel wanted to refuse the call. His daughter's school conference was the next morning. He had promised to attend. He had also promised his wife that he would be home before midnight. He took the keys from the hook. The coast was clear when he reached Carmel. By the time he passed the last cluster of lights, fog had covered the road. It gathered in the hollows first, then it rose over the pavement. The wrecker's headlights illuminated a narrow tunnel that moved with him. Daniel kept the radio on. Lena gave him the location. Her voice sounded strained. "Caller says the car stopped by itself. Battery. He says the engine died while he was driving. Any injuries? No. Stay on the line. I am here." The sedan stood beside the maintenance gate with both front doors open. The interior light was on. A man waited behind the guardrail, clutching a coat around his chest. Daniel parked behind him and turned on the amber flashers. The man hurried toward the wrecker. "It is not starting," he said. Daniel looked inside the sedan. The keys remained in the ignition. The radio played faint music through a dead speaker. "What did you see on the road?" The man shook his head. "You said someone was standing there. I thought it was a person. What did it do?" "It turned its back." Daniel opened the hood. The engine was warm. The battery terminals were clean. Nothing explained the failure. Below the road, the surf struck the rocks in a slow rhythm. Daniel heard a second sound beneath it, a low mechanical hum. He turned toward the guardrail. The yellow light was directly below them. It glowed through the fog, close enough that Daniel could see a faint shape around it. Not a boat, not a lamp hanging from a cable. The light moved upward along the face of the cliff. The stranded driver stepped beside him. "What is that?" Daniel raised one hand. The light stopped. The radio inside the sedan came alive. Static filled the cabin. Then a woman spoke through the dead speaker. "Keep the truck pointed north." Daniel could not move. Lena's voice came from the handset in his pocket. "Daniel, who is that?" The voice in the sedan continued. "Do not let it reach the road." The stranded driver backed away. His shoes scraped over gravel. The light began climbing faster. Daniel pulled the winch line from its cradle. He hooked it to the sedan and returned to the cab. His hands moved without thought, tightening the straps, checking the mirrors, locking the doors. The driver stood beside the passenger door. "Get in the truck," Daniel said. The man opened the door. Something struck the underside of the wrecker. The impact lifted the cab a fraction. Tools rattled in their compartments. The man froze with one foot on the step. Daniel reached across and pulled him inside. Another impact came from beneath them. This one traveled through the frame and up Daniel's legs. The fog on the cliff edge thinned. For a moment, Daniel saw the shape around the light. It was tall and narrow, moving on the vertical rock as if the cliff were level ground. The yellow glow came from a lantern held at chest height. No face showed behind it. The lantern rose until it was level with the road. Daniel shifted the wrecker into gear. The truck pulled forward, dragging the sedan behind it. Gravel sprayed from the tires. The maintenance gate struck the side mirror and fell away. The light reached the guardrail. The stranded driver looked back. "Do not look," Daniel said. He screamed once. Daniel accelerated north. The truck climbed through the fog. The radio speaker crackled with Lena's voice, but her words were buried beneath static. Behind them, the sedan began to roll. Daniel checked the mirror. The tow line had gone slack. The car was moving on its own, following the wrecker without tension in the cable. He braked. The sedan stopped. A yellow glow filled its rear window. Daniel put the truck in reverse. The fog pressed against the windshield. The stranded driver was crouched on the floor, both hands over his head. Daniel pulled the wrecker forward again. The sedan followed. For the next mile, he did not look in the mirror. He kept the truck centered between the lines. The road curved left then right. Branches brushed the roof. The ocean continued its heavy work below them. At the first clear stretch, the fog broke apart. The sedan was no longer attached to the truck. It stood alone behind them, parked in the center of the highway. Its headlights were off. Daniel stopped near a turnout and stepped out. The stranded driver remained inside the cab. The night had become ordinary again. Wind moved through the trees. A truck passed in the opposite lane, its tires hissing on damp asphalt. Daniel walked back to the sedan. The driver's door was open. The keys were gone. The interior light had burned out. A thin line of wet footprints crossed the pavement from the car to the guardrail. They ended there. Daniel looked over the edge. Nothing moved below. The stranded driver left the coast in a patrol car. He never returned for his vehicle. Daniel had the sedan towed to the company yard, but it disappeared before morning. No one admitted authorizing the removal. At the office, Lena printed the dispatch record. The call had come from a number that belonged to Big Sur Recovery. The line had been disconnected for 7 years. Daniel kept the paper in his notebook. He attended Marisol's school conference the next day. He sat in a small classroom beneath a poster about ocean safety and listened while her teacher described her talent for drawing boats. Daniel nodded at the right times. His hand stayed folded around the socket wrench in his jacket pocket. He never told his family about the figure on the cliff. He continued working, but he changed his route whenever a call came from the southern section after midnight. If he had to go, he kept the radio off. He also stopped using the truck's passenger seat. He removed the cushion and stored it in the garage. The yellow light returned once a year. It appeared below the fog, moving along the water where no road existed. Daniel saw it from the inland highway, from a motel parking lot, and once from his own backyard when the coastal mist reached the valley. Each time he went inside and locked the doors. People who work beside cliffs learn that the road has more than one edge. One is made of asphalt and stone. The other is measured by what the fog allows a person to believe is beneath them. Daniel still keeps a socket wrench in every jacket. He still brings home his wife's metal lunch container. But whenever the house grows quiet after midnight, he places the wrench on the kitchen table and turns it so the handle points toward the window. He leaves it there until morning. Mason Bell delivered produce along the coast before most people finished breakfast. His route began in Monterey and ended near the small communities south of Gorda, where restaurants received boxes of lettuce, avocados, lemons, and frozen fish through a loading door no wider than a garage. He drove a white box truck with a dented rear panel and a refrigeration unit that clicked every 11 minutes. Mason knew the pattern so well that he could hear when the motor was about to restart. The click came first, then a low vibration beneath the floor, then the steady hum of cold air moving through the cargo space. He liked that sound. It meant the food was safe. It meant the truck was doing what it was supposed to do. Mason was 38 and lived in a small apartment above a hardware store in Salinas. He kept a collection of motel key tags in a coffee tin beside his bed. Each one came from a place where he had delivered. Some were bright plastic. Some were old metal. He wrote the date on the back of every tag in black ink. Before leaving for work, he watered a basil plant on the kitchen windowsill. The plant leaned toward the glass and had survived 2 summers when Mason forgot to open the blinds. He spoke to it while tying his boots. "Stay alive today," his younger sister, Nina, called during his first break. She worked at a dental office and complained about patients who arrived early and still acted late. Mason listened while unloading crates at a restaurant in Carmel. "You sound tired," Nina said. "I am carrying vegetables for a living. You carry vegetables every day." "Exactly," she laughed. Mason liked making her laugh. Their father had died when they were teenagers, and Nina still called him whenever she had to drive over a bridge or speak to a landlord. Mason never told her that he also disliked high places. He simply stayed on the phone until she reached the other side. His route followed Highway 1 through long stretches without service. Mason knew which pullouts had bathrooms, which gas stations accepted company cards, and which restaurants kept leftover pastries near the back door. He often ate his lunch sitting on the tailgate, with one foot on the bumper and the other resting on a tire. He did not rush the first half of the route. The coast was too narrow for rushing. A delivery truck that took a curve too fast could spend the afternoon hanging over a ravine while the driver explained himself to the highway patrol. The green pickup first appeared on a Tuesday in early spring. Mason noticed it in the side mirror near a turnout south of Lucia. It was an older Ford dark green with a faded white stripe along the bed. One headlight looked brighter than the other. The truck followed behind him at a distance of about 6 car lengths. Mason did not think much of it. The highway carried the same vehicles for miles. Tourists followed rental cars. Locals followed delivery trucks. Everyone moved at the speed of the road. At the next curve, Mason slowed to let an oncoming bus pass. The green pickup slowed too. At the next straightaway, Mason accelerated. The pickup remained 6 car lengths behind. He forgot about it after reaching the restaurant near Gorda. The manager signed the delivery sheet with a red pen. Mason carried 12 boxes through the kitchen, dodged a cook holding a tray of oysters, and found a blueberry muffin waiting on the counter. He ate half of it before returning to the truck. The green pickup was parked across the road. Mason saw the driver through the windshield. A man wearing a dark cap sat with both hands on the steering wheel. He did not look toward Mason. The pickup remained there until Mason started the engine. Then it pulled away. Mason followed his route south. The next morning, the same truck appeared near the same stretch of road. The bright headlight caught his mirror. Mason watched it for several minutes. When he turned into a restaurant driveway, the pickup continued past. That made sense. The following day, it turned into the driveway too. Mason stayed in the cab until the truck had gone. The refrigeration unit clicked on behind him. Cold air pressed through the cargo space. He looked at the green pickup in the mirror as it disappeared around the bend. At lunch, he told a cook named Raphael about it. "Could be another delivery driver," Raphael said. "Do you know him?" Raphael shook his head. "Most people here know each other by their trucks." Mason tore a piece from his sandwich. "The driver never gets out." Raphael looked toward the window. "Then do not give him a reason." The words sounded casual. Raphael returned to chopping onions. Mason finished his lunch without tasting it. That afternoon, he stopped at the Gorda gas station. The attendant, an older woman named Irene, knew him by name and kept a jar of cinnamon candies near the register. Mason asked if she had noticed a green Ford pickup. Irene kept counting change. Lots of green trucks. Older one. White stripe on the bed, one headlight brighter than the other. She looked through the front window. "It has been here." "When?" "Yesterday." "Maybe the day before." "Did the driver buy anything?" "He paid cash for coffee." "Did he say anything?" Irene placed the coins in the drawer. "He asked when you usually stop." Mason stared at her. "What did you tell him?" Irene's mouth tightened. "I told him I did not keep your calendar." Mason thanked her and left the gas station without a candy. He called his supervisor from the truck. The supervisor listened and told him to write down the license plate if he saw it. Mason checked the rear-view mirror. The green pickup was waiting at the far end of the station lot. He did not write down the plate. Instead, he drove north without making the next delivery. The pickup followed until the road divided near a construction zone. Mason took the inland detour toward King City. The green truck continued along Highway 1. For the first time in 3 days, Mason reached home without seeing it. He watered the basil plant and found the soil still damp. He stood at the kitchen window for several minutes, watching headlights move along the street below. Every dark vehicle looked green at a distance. The next morning, he changed his routine. He left 30 minutes early. He stopped at a different bakery. He took the route in reverse and delivered to the southern restaurants first. The green pickup appeared near Gorda. It came from a side road Mason had not used before. He saw it in the reflection of a restaurant window while carrying a crate of lemons. The truck idled beside a wooden fence. The driver's cap was turned backward this time. Mason put down the crate. A waitress came through the door behind him. "You forgot the fish." Mason picked up the crate again. When he looked back, the pickup had moved. The restaurant owner agreed to show him the security footage. The camera covered the rear delivery entrance and a section of the road. Mason watched himself arrive back into the loading space and carry the crates inside. 3 minutes later, the green pickup stopped beside the fence. The driver remained in the cab. After 7 minutes, the truck pulled away. The owner paused the video. "Do you know him?" "No. You want me to call someone?" Mason looked at the screen. The green pickup had entered the frame again from the opposite direction. It had circled the restaurant before returning to the fence. Not yet. The owner frowned. Why not? Because I need to know what he wants. The owner shook his head. That is how people get hurt. Mason took a photograph of the screen with his phone. At the next delivery, the green pickup waited across the highway. Mason parked behind the restaurant and used the rear entrance. He carried each box through the kitchen, while the refrigeration unit continued its steady clicking outside. When he finished, a folded piece of paper sat beneath his windshield wiper. Mason did not touch it at first. The paper had been torn from a yellow legal pad. His name was written across the front. He looked around the lot. A gull cried from the roof. A refrigerator compressor started inside the kitchen. Water moved through a drain beneath his boots. No one stood near the road. Mason opened the note with a pen. You missed one stop. There was no signature. Mason checked the delivery list. Every restaurant had received its order. He called the office and read the names aloud. The supervisor said the list was complete. Mason folded the note and put it in his wallet. That night, he searched his apartment for signs that someone had followed him home. The basil plant stood on the windowsill. The motel key tags remained in the coffee tin. His work boots were where he had left them. Nothing had moved. The next week, Mason contacted the highway patrol. A deputy met him at a turnout near San Simeon. Mason gave the deputy the photographs and described the truck. The deputy studied the images. Did you get the plate? No. Any threats? Not directly. Then we can make a report, but there is not much else. Mason looked at the ocean. The deputy followed his gaze. Do not stop for him. If he pulls up beside you, call 911. He has not pulled beside me. People do not always start there. The deputy handed back the phone. Mason drove north after the meeting. The sky darkened before noon. Fog flowed across the road and covered the shoulders. The green pickup appeared behind him near a narrow bridge. Mason checked the mirror. The truck was closer than before, 3 car lengths, then 2. He kept his speed steady. The pickup moved toward the center line as if preparing to pass. Mason tightened his grip on the wheel. The truck stayed beside him for several seconds, its bright headlights shining through the side window. The driver looked over. Mason saw a man in his 40s with a narrow face and a trimmed beard. He wore a dark cap and a gray work shirt. His expression was calm. The pickup dropped behind him. Mason drove until he reached a busy overlook where several tourists stood near the rail. He pulled in beside a family van and left the engine running. The green pickup stopped at the entrance. The driver did not get out. Mason called the deputy. The truck remained there while the phone rang. When the deputy answered, Mason gave the location. Do not approach him, the deputy said. I am not. Stay where people can see you. The green pickup's engine cut off. The driver stepped out. He was taller than Mason expected. He walked toward the overlook with both hands visible. Tourists moved around him, taking photographs and talking over the wind. Mason stayed inside the box truck. The man stopped beside the driver's door. He looked through the glass. Mason heard a soft knock. The man raised one finger and tapped again. Mason locked the doors. The man smiled. A tour bus pulled into the overlook. Its brakes hissed. The driver shouted for pedestrians to move aside. The green pickup man stepped back, his face hidden behind the bus. Mason started the truck and pulled onto the highway. The deputy arrived 20 minutes later. The green pickup was gone. Its tire tracks crossed the gravel beside the overlook and disappeared toward a service road. That evening, Mason's supervisor removed him from the coastal route. He spent the next month delivering inland where the roads were wider and the towns closer together. The green pickup did not appear. Mason began to believe the problem had ended. Then Irene from the Gorda station called the office. She said a man had entered the store and asked for Mason's delivery schedule. When she refused, he placed a yellow legal pad on the counter and left. The paper contained a list of restaurant names. Everyone belonged to Mason's route. The supervisor called the police again. This time, an investigator took the case. She asked Mason about former employees, unpaid debts, angry customers, and anyone who might know his schedule. Mason thought of no one. The investigator showed him photographs from a database. The green pickup had been seen near several coastal businesses. It had no current registration. The license plate belonged to a different vehicle. There was no clear image of the driver. Weeks passed, the case went quiet. Mason returned to the coast in early summer, but he no longer drove alone. Another employee rode with him during the first month. They talked about baseball, traffic, and the price of diesel. Neither mentioned the green pickup. One morning, Mason stopped at the Gorda gas station. Irene handed him a cinnamon candy. "Your truck is waiting outside," she said. Mason turned toward the window. Across the road, an older green Ford sat beneath a cypress tree. The driver's seat was empty. Mason stepped away from the glass. The refrigeration unit in his truck clicked on. Cold air began moving through the cargo space. Irene watched him. "Do you want me to call someone?" Mason shook his head. He left the candy on the counter and walked back to the truck. Before entering, he checked beneath the chassis, behind the rear tires, and inside the empty space between the cab and the cargo box. Then he climbed in and locked every door. The green pickup remained under the cypress tree until he drove away. Mason never learned who had followed him. The investigator found no body, no confession, and no reason that explained the notes. The highway simply carried on, giving the same curves to people who had never heard his name. But Mason changed one thing permanently. He stopped using the rearview mirror. Whenever a vehicle appeared behind him, he watched its shadow instead. If the shadow stayed the same distance through every curve, Mason pulled into the nearest public place and waited for daylight. He still delivers along the coast. He still carries a paper lunch packed by his wife. He still keeps a motel key tag in the glove compartment for every year he survives the route. The basil plant died during one long summer. Mason did not replace it. At night, when he hears a truck idling outside his apartment, he does not look through the window. He turns off the kitchen light, places his keys in the center of the table, and waits until the engine fades into the street. Then he checks the lock once and once again. Evelyn Shaw woke before the alarm because the motel pipes had started knocking inside the walls. The sound traveled from the laundry room to the office, then faded beneath the floorboards. 3 knocks, a pause, 2 more. She lay still and listened. The pipes had been doing that since October. Evelyn had written the maintenance company twice. The first time, they sent a man who tightened a valve and left a greasy thumbprint on the office door. The second time, they said the building was old, and old buildings made their own noises. Evelyn believed them. Most days, she believed every explanation that allowed her to keep working. She managed the Seabright Motor Lodge just outside Cambria. The motel had 24 rooms arranged around a cracked courtyard, with a swimming pool that had been empty since the last drought. A faded sign near the road promised ocean views, although only 6 rooms could actually see the water. Room 11 was one of those 6. Evelyn had lived at the motel for 8 years. Her apartment sat behind the office above the laundry room. She kept a ceramic bluebird on the kitchen windowsill and moved it whenever the morning light changed. She drank tea from a chipped mug, printed with a picture of a lighthouse. The lighthouse had lost one of its painted windows, leaving a white square near the top. Every morning she fed 2 crows that waited on the roof. The larger one had a damaged foot. Evelyn called him Captain. The smaller one had a silver patch beneath its beak. She called her Little Coat. She never told anyone those names. Before opening the office, Evelyn walked through the courtyard with a broom. She swept sand from the concrete, picked up bottle caps near the vending machine, and checked the locks on every empty room. She kept a paper ledger beneath the front desk because the computer froze whenever the ocean air became heavy. The Seabright had survived storms, fires, 3 different owners, and a year when no one wanted to travel. Evelyn survived by making the same rounds in the same order. At 6:45, she opened the curtains. At 7, she started the coffee. At 7:15, she checked room 11. The room had been closed for 12 years. A brass plaque beside the door read 11, but the number leaned slightly to the left. Evelyn had asked the previous owner to replace it. He told her the room had always looked that way. Inside, the furniture was covered with white sheets. The bed stood against the far wall. A narrow table sat beneath the window. The sliding glass door led to a balcony facing the ocean. The balcony chair had been removed. That was the first thing Evelyn checked every morning. She unlocked the door, stepped inside, and stood without moving. The room smelled of dust, salt, and old carpet. She looked at the sheets, the table, the curtains, and the empty space beside the sliding door. Then she locked the room again. The chair had belonged to a guest named Nora Vale. Nora checked into room 11 during a winter storm. She was 42, traveled alone, and paid for 3 nights in cash. The old owner remembered that she carried a green suitcase and wore a red scarf. On the second morning, he found the room unlocked. Nora was gone. Her suitcase remained on the bed. Her shoes remained beneath the table. Her car sat in the parking lot with the keys inside. The balcony chair was missing. Search teams combed the beach below the cliffs. They found a red scarf caught in driftwood, but no body. The owner claimed Nora had taken the chair outside and gone over the railing. The police never found a chair on the rocks. After that, the room stayed closed. Evelyn learned the story on her second week at the motel. A former housekeeper told her while folding towels. The woman's voice became quiet when she reached the part about the chair. "Do not put furniture on that balcony," she said. Evelyn did not. For years, room 11 remained an empty part of the building. Guests sometimes asked about the locked door. Evelyn told them it was being repaired. People accepted that answer. They liked the ocean more than they liked old explanations. The first sound came in February. It began just after 2 in the morning. Evelyn was in the office, balancing receipts beneath the yellow desk lamp. Outside, the wind moved through the cypress trees. The pool cover tapped against the metal fence. Somewhere along the road, a truck passed with a low rush of tires. Then came the sound from room 11. A chair dragged across concrete. The noise lasted only a second. It began near the sliding door and ended near the balcony railing. Evelyn looked up. The office clock showed 2:14. She waited for another sound. Nothing came. She took the master key from the hook and walked across the courtyard. The motel lights hummed above her. Her broom rested against the office wall. The ocean was hidden beyond the dark line of trees, but she could hear waves breaking below the cliffs. Evelyn unlocked room 11. The sheets remained in place. The table stood beneath the window. The balcony door was closed. There was no chair. She checked the lock twice and returned to the office. The next night, the sound came again. 2:14, a scrape across concrete, a soft stop. Evelyn did not go inside. She stood behind the office window and watched the door. The number plaque leaned to the left. A moth circled the light above it. The sound did not return. In the morning, Evelyn found a narrow line across the dust on the balcony. It began beside the sliding door and ended at the railing. She knelt and touched it with one finger. The dust felt damp. Evelyn called the owner, a man named Glenn who lived in Sacramento and visited once every few months. "Could be an animal," he said. "An animal dragged something. You said there is no chair in there. There is no furniture on the balcony. Then it is probably a branch. There are no branches." Glenn sighed through the phone. "Lock the room and leave it alone." Evelyn looked across the courtyard. The ocean wind moved the curtains in room 11, although the glass door was closed. She did not mention that. The sound continued for 9 nights, always at 2:14. Always one scrape, always from the balcony. Evelyn began writing the time in her ledger. She also wrote down the weather: clear sky, fog, rain, wind from the west, no wind. The sound did not change. On the 10th night, a guest complained. A young couple in room 12 called the office at 2:20. "There is furniture moving next door," the man said. Evelyn asked what kind of furniture. "A chair, I think." She sat behind the desk with the phone pressed to her ear. "Room 11 is empty." The man laughed without humor. "Then someone is in there." Evelyn told him she should check. She carried the master key across the courtyard. Room 12's curtains were closed. The couple watched from behind the glass. Room 11 was locked. Evelyn opened it. The room smelled of wet fabric. A dark mark ran from the bed to the balcony door. It looked like a trail left by something dragged over the carpet. Evelyn stepped closer. The mark ended beneath the table. She pulled the table away from the wall. Nothing was beneath it. The couple from room 12 stood in the courtyard. "Did you find anything?" the woman asked. Evelyn looked toward the balcony. "No." The woman glanced at the door. Someone said a name. "What name?" The woman shook her head. "I could not make it out." Evelyn locked room 11 and returned to the office. She did not sleep that night. At 4 in the morning, she sat in the laundry room with a basket of towels and listened to the building settle around her. The pipes knocked again, 3 times a pause, 2 more. The next afternoon, Evelyn searched the old files. She found Nora Vale's registration card in a metal cabinet beneath the office desk. The card had been folded and unfolded so often that the paper had softened along the creases. Nora's address was in Santa Rosa. Her emergency contact was blank. Evelyn searched newspaper clippings and old police notes. The articles described a winter storm, a missing woman, and an unsuccessful search. One article mentioned a balcony chair. The police had found it. Not on the rocks, not on the beach. It was discovered 2 miles north of the motel, standing upright beside a closed section of highway. The chair was wet. There had been no footprints around it. Evelyn read that paragraph 3 times. At sunset, a maintenance worker named Jonah came to repair a leaking pipe near the pool. He was 17 and wore headphones around his neck. Evelyn asked if he had ever heard noises from room 11. Jonah looked at the locked door. "I hear it sometimes." "How long?" He shrugged. "Since I started working here. You never told me. You never asked." Evelyn handed him a wrench. "What does it sound like?" Jonah thought for a moment. "Like someone sitting down." He returned to the pool shed. That night, Evelyn placed a small recording device outside room 11. She set it on the concrete beneath the number plaque and covered it with a plastic cup. At 2:14, the sound came. The device recorded the scrape. It also recorded a second noise that Evelyn did not hear at the time, a slow breath. She played the file in the office with the lights off. The scrape moved across the speaker. Then there was a long stretch of static beneath it. Evelyn turned up the volume. The whisper became clearer. "Evelyn." She stopped the recording. The office refrigerator clicked on. A car passed outside. Captain and little coat shifted on the roof above her. Evelyn played the file again. The whisper was gone. She did not tell Jonah. She did not call Glenn. She placed the recorder inside a drawer and locked it. The next morning, the balcony door of room 11 stood open. Evelyn had checked it the night before. She knew she had. She had turned the handle until the latch caught. Now the glass door moved in the wind. The curtains breathed in and out. On the balcony, a chair stood beside the railing. It was a wooden chair with peeling white paint. Water darkened the seat. A red thread clung to one armrest. Evelyn remained in the doorway. The chair faced the ocean. She could not remember bringing it there. She backed out and locked the room. When Glenn arrived 2 days later, he stood in the courtyard with his hands in his coat pockets. He looked older than Evelyn remembered. His hair had thinned at the crown. His eyes avoided the balcony. "You need to remove it," he said. "Where did it come from?" "You know where it came from. Who put it there?" Glenn rubbed his mouth. "Some things are better left alone." Evelyn looked at him. That is what people say when they do not want to answer. Glenn told her to burn the chair. Evelyn refused. That night, she moved her bed away from the apartment window. She pushed a dresser against the door and slept with the television on. At 2:14, the scrape came from across the courtyard. Then it came again. This time it ended outside her apartment. Evelyn sat up. The television showed a frozen image of a weather map. The pipes inside the walls began knocking. 3 times a pause, 2 more. Something dragged across the hallway floor. Evelyn took the brass poker from beside the heater. She walked to the door and placed one eye against the peephole. The corridor was empty. The chair stood outside room 11, not her apartment. Its wet legs left dark marks across the concrete. The chair faced away from the ocean now. It faced her. Evelyn did not open the door. She remained there until dawn, holding the poker in both hands. When the first light reached the courtyard, the chair was gone. A wet line led from room 11 to the office. It stopped beneath the front desk. Evelyn found the old registration card there. Nora Vale's name had been written across the back in fresh black ink. No message, only the name. Evelyn closed the office and stayed with her sister in Salinas for 4 nights. She told Nina that the pipes were making her lose sleep. Nina offered to drive her back to the motel and help replace the locks. Evelyn said no. When she returned, the chair was gone. Room 11 was still locked. The balcony was empty except for a scatter of salt crystals along the railing. She kept the room closed. Guests continued to ask about the ocean view. Evelyn gave them other rooms. She stopped saying. Room 11 was under repair. She simply told them it was not available. The sound came less often after that. Sometimes weeks passed, sometimes months. Evelyn never heard it from the office again. It came from other places instead. The laundry room. The stairwell, the end of the courtyard near the vending machines. Always one scrape, always a soft stop. She began walking through the motel at 2:14 every night. She checked the locks in order 1 through 10, 12 through 24. She skipped 11. At the end of the round, she returned to the office and placed a wooden chair beneath the front window. She sat there until the sky changed color. The Seabright eventually closed. The owner sold the property to a developer who planned to build vacation homes. Evelyn moved into a small house inland, far enough from the coast that the air smelled of dust instead of salt. She brought the lighthouse mug. She brought the bluebird. She brought the ledger. She left the motel keys behind. For a while she slept well. Then one night at 2:14, she heard a chair move across the kitchen floor. Evelyn opened her eyes. The house was dark. The ocean was more than 10 miles away. No wind touched the windows. She did not turn on the light. In the morning, she found a thin, wet line between the kitchen table and the back door. At the end of it sat a wooden chair with peeling white paint. It faced the window. Evelyn never burned it. She never moved it. She placed another chair beside it and kept both of them there, exactly as they were. Some places do not need to be haunted to stay inside a person. A locked room can become a habit of thought. A sound can become part of the furniture, and an empty view can remain occupied long after everyone has gone. Every evening, Evelyn covers the 2 chairs with white sheets. Every morning, she removes the sheets before opening the curtains. She never checks which direction they are facing. Noah Whitaker kept his camera batteries in a wool sock. He said the sock stopped them from rattling inside his bag. His friends knew he used it because his grandmother had knitted the pair during a winter when the power went out for 3 days. One sock had been lost. The other held 6 batteries, a pocket compass, and a folded photograph of Noah as a child. He carried the sock everywhere. Noah photographed the coast before sunrise, when the tide pools reflected the sky and the rocks still held the night's moisture. He worked alone most of the time. He disliked crowds near the water. Tourists stepped over anemones, leaned on fragile sea plants, and complained when the fog hid the horizon. Noah preferred the hours when the shoreline belonged to the tide. He lived in a rented cottage north of Cambria with a porch no wider than a hallway. The porch faced a stand of cypress trees. Each morning he boiled water in a dented kettle and listened to the radio while cleaning his lenses. His grandmother had taught him to clean glass with a piece of old cotton cloth. "Never use paper," she told him. "Paper leaves scratches that do not show until the sun is behind you." Noah kept the cloth folded into a square and stored it in the same drawer as his keys. On clear mornings, he drove north with the camera beside him and a thermos of coffee between his knees. On foggy mornings, he drove slower and counted the curves. The highway dropped toward the ocean, then climbed through dark trees. He knew the pullouts by the shape of their guardrails. The tide pools near a place called Black Reef were his favorite. The shore there was reached by a narrow trail behind a row of cypress. At low tide, the rocks opened into shallow basins filled with sea stars, limpets, anemones, and tiny fish that vanished beneath the water whenever Noah moved too quickly. The place had another name among the locals, the Woman's Pools. Noah first heard it from a fisherman named Ellis who sold abalone permits from a small shed near the trailhead. Ellis was 70 and wore the same brown jacket in every season. "Do not stay after the tide turns," Ellis told him. "Why?" Ellis looked toward the water. "She does not like people standing there when the pools close." Noah assumed he meant the tide. Ellis did not smile. The first time Noah visited Black Reef, he arrived before dawn. The beach was still dark. He heard the tide before he saw it. Water rushed through the channels between the rocks, then pulled away with a dragging hiss. Gulls called from somewhere beyond the fog. Noah walked down the trail, placing each foot between exposed roots. The air smelled of kelp and wet stone. His boots slipped twice before he reached the shelf above the pools. He set up his tripod. The fog covered the ocean completely. The horizon had no edge, sound carried farther than sight. A buoy bell rang somewhere offshore, each note arriving after a long stretch of empty air. Noah took his first photograph when the sky began to lighten. The image showed a tide pool filled with pale green water. Sea anemones opened along the rim. A small crab moved beneath the surface. He took another, then another. The work settled him. He watched light spread across the rocks. He waited for waves to retreat. He adjusted the focus by hand and kept his breathing slow so the lens would not fog. At 6:20, he heard footsteps behind him, not on the trail on the rocks. The steps came carefully heel to toe, as if someone was walking barefoot across broken glass. Noah turned. A woman stood beside the largest pool. She wore a long gray dress that reached her ankles. Her hair hung forward over one shoulder. She faced the water and kept her hands at her sides. Noah lowered the camera. "Are you all right?" The woman did not move. A wave struck the outer rocks. Water spilled into the pool around her feet. She did not step back. Noah waited for her to look at him. She never did. He took one photograph. The shutter sounded too loud in the morning air. The woman turned her head slightly. Noah saw the curve of her cheek, but not her eyes. Her hair covered most of her face. When he looked down to check the image, the woman was gone. The pool remained. Noah scanned the rocks. There was nowhere to hide. The trail was empty. The fog pressed against the beach. He walked to the edge of the pool. The water was cold enough to ache through his glove. Beneath the surface, pale anemones folded inward. A strand of black seaweed wrapped around a stone. No footprints marked the wet rock. Noah packed his camera and left before the tide turned. At home, he developed the photograph. He worked in a small dark room behind the cottage. The room smelled of chemicals and damp wood. Noah clipped the print to a line and watched the image emerge beneath the red light. The tide pool appeared first, then the rocks, then the woman. She stood with her back to the camera. Her gray dress was visible from the waist down. Above her shoulders, there was only fog, no head, no hair. The upper half of her body blended into the pale background as if the picture had been cut away. Noah stared at the print. He checked the negative. The same shape appeared there. He placed the photograph in a folder and wrote the date on the back. The following week, he returned to Black Reef. The tide was lower than expected. The pools had opened wider, exposing narrow channels filled with small fish. Noah set his tripod near the same rock and waited for the sky to brighten. He heard the footsteps before he saw her heel to toe. "Careful!" The woman stood at the far end of the shelf. She wore the same gray dress. Her hair hung over one shoulder. She faced the water. Noah did not call out. He watched her through the viewfinder. The camera showed an empty stretch of rock. "No, woman." Noah lowered it. She stood 20 feet away. He raised the camera again. The rock was empty. His finger remained above the shutter. He did not take the photograph. The woman stepped toward the largest pool. Water moved around her ankles. She kept walking until it reached her knees. The pool was not that deep. Noah knew the shape of the rock beneath the water. He had photographed it many times. The woman continued forward. Her dress darkened. Her hair lifted slightly as if a current had passed through it. Noah stepped toward her. The tide surged between them. A wave struck his shins and knocked one knee against the rock. He caught himself with both hands. Salt water entered his gloves. When he looked up, the pool was empty. He climbed back to dry ground and sat there until the water withdrew. His camera remained untouched inside the bag. On the trail above the beach, he found Ellis waiting beside the cypress. "You saw her," Ellis said. Noah did not ask who. "Have you seen her?" Ellis rubbed his thumb over a frayed cuff. "My brother did." "What happened?" "He went into the water." "Was he hurt?" Ellis looked at the fog. "He came back without his boots." Noah waited. Ellis added, "He would not go near the coast again, not even to cross a bridge." The old fisherman walked away before Noah could ask anything else. Noah returned to the cottage and searched local archives. He found references to a woman named Miriam Vale, who had drowned near Black Reef in the 1970s. Another article described a girl swept from the rocks during a storm. A third mentioned a body that had never been recovered. The names changed. The place did not. Each account described a woman in gray standing in the tide pools before someone went missing. The details differed. In one story, she carried a lantern. In another, she wore a wedding dress. One witness said she had no face. Another said she looked exactly like the person who later disappeared. Noah printed the articles and kept them in a folder beside the photographs. He told himself the folklore had shaped what he saw. He had heard the story before visiting the pools. The mind borrowed images from whatever it had been given. The fog filled in the rest. That explanation lasted until he found the second photograph. He had not remembered taking it. The print showed the tide pool from a different angle. The woman stood near the water, her back turned. This time her upper body was visible. Her face was reflected in the pool. Noah recognized it. It was his own face. He put the photograph face down and left the dark room. For several days he stopped photographing the coast. He worked on old assignments at home. He photographed the basil plant outside the window, the kettle on the stove, and a chipped mug beside the sink. None of the images showed anything unusual. Then a client called from San Luis Obispo and offered him a job documenting shoreline erosion near Black Reef. The assignment paid enough to cover 2 months of rent. Noah accepted. He arrived at the beach just before low tide. The fog had lifted, but the water remained gray beneath a sky the color of metal. He brought 2 cameras this time. He left the wool sock of batteries in the truck. A group of tourists stood near the trailhead. A father held a child's hand while explaining the difference between a sea star and a jellyfish. Their voices carried over the rocks. Noah waited for them to leave. The tide moved out. The pools opened. He began photographing. The first images were ordinary: sea anemones, barnacles, a gull picking at something in the sand light, entering the water in pale columns. Then the sound came, footsteps behind him, heel to toe. Careful, Noah did not turn. The tourists were gone. The beach held only the tide and the distant call of a gull. He lifted the camera. The viewfinder showed the largest pool. The woman stood there. Her dress was soaked to the waist. Her hair covered her face. She held something in both hands. Noah lowered the camera. The pool was empty. He raised it again. The woman remained in the frame. This time she faced him. Her features were indistinct, but her eyes were clear. They reflected the same gray sky above the beach. She lifted the object in her hands. It was a camera. Noah stepped backward. His heel struck the edge of another pool. Water ran over his boot. He looked down and saw a thin black line moving beneath the surface. The line was a camera strap. It wrapped around his ankle. Noah pulled hard. The strap tightened. He fell onto one hand, scraping his palm against the rock. The camera swung from his neck and struck the ground. The tide surged through the channel. A wave reached his knee. Noah grabbed the strap with both hands and pulled. The fabric felt cold and slick. Something tugged from beneath the water. He dragged his ankle free. The strap snapped. A camera rose briefly in the pool, held upright by the current. Its lens pointed toward him. Then the water closed over it. Noah crawled toward the higher rocks. He left his camera behind. The tide continued entering the pools, filling each basin until the surface became smooth. Across the largest pool, the woman stood again. Noah could see her without the camera now. She turned toward the ocean. For a moment, he thought she was going to walk into the water. Instead, she stepped backward and disappeared between 2 rocks. There was no splash. Noah stayed on the beach until the tide began to fall. He did not approach the pool. He did not search for the camera beneath it. At the trailhead, Ellis found him sitting beside the cypress. The old fisherman looked at Noah's torn strap. "You took her picture," Ellis said. "I did not mean to. That does not matter." Noah asked what would happen next. Ellis stared toward the water. "You will stop seeing her when you stop bringing the camera." Noah sold both cameras within the month. He did not sell the photographs. He kept them in a box beneath his bed, wrapped in cotton cloth. Once a year, he opened the box and checked the prints. The first image still showed the faceless woman. The second still showed Noah's reflection. The photograph he did not remember taking remained in the folder. He never looked at it again. Noah continued living near the coast. He worked in a frame shop inland and photographed only objects that could not move: lamps, doorways, empty chairs. He avoided reflective surfaces whenever possible. He also stopped wearing socks with holes. The wool sock that had carried his batteries disappeared from the truck after the incident. Noah searched the cab, the garage, and the frame shop. He never found it. Years later, when friends asked why he no longer photographed the ocean, Noah told them the light was difficult. He said the mist ruined the focus. He said there were better subjects inland. He never mentioned the woman. The tide pools continue to close over their own tracks. A person can stand beside one at dawn and see nothing but water, stone, and small creatures moving beneath the surface. Then the tide turns, and the same place becomes too deep to cross. That is how stories survive near the sea. They remain quiet until someone steps into the wrong pool at the wrong hour. Noah keeps one empty frame on the wall above his desk. It holds no photograph. Every morning he wipes the glass with his grandmother's cotton cloth. Then he turns the frame toward the wall before opening the blinds. Luis Ortega kept a small red cooler behind the driver's seat of his work truck. Inside, he carried 2 bottles of water, a wrapped cheese sandwich, and a plastic container filled with sliced mango. His wife prepared the mango every morning before leaving for her own shift at a laundry in Salinas. She sprinkled chili powder over it. Luis always saved the spiciest pieces for the drive home. He worked for the Coastal Road Maintenance Department, where his crew cleared fallen branches, repaired guardrails, and reopened lanes after storms. He had been on the job for 17 years. He knew how the pavement changed near a cliff, which drains clogged first, and which bends collected stones even when the sky stayed clear. His coworkers called him the department's unofficial historian. Luis remembered every road closure by date. He could point toward a hillside and tell you when it had slid before, how far the dirt had traveled, and which tree had remained standing through all of it. Every morning he tied his boots twice. The first knot was for work. The second was for walking home. He had a daughter named Elena who studied nursing at a college in San Luis Obispo. Luis called her during his lunch break even when she did not answer. He left short messages about traffic, weather, or the dog next door that kept stealing newspapers. He did not leave messages about the cliffs. On the first Monday of February, rain reached the coast before dawn. It fell steadily through the night, filling gullies and turning the shoulders of Highway 1 into long strips of brown water. By sunrise, the dispatch office had already received 3 reports of rockfall. Luis met his crew near a maintenance yard south of Gorda. Their supervisor, Ray Danner, stood beside the equipment trailer with a clipboard pressed beneath his jacket. "Slide near mile marker," Ray said. 1 lane blocked. Maybe more. The crew loaded chainsaws, shovels, hydraulic jacks, and a compact excavator. Luis checked each strap twice. Water dripped from the brim of his helmet. The air smelled of wet soil and diesel. They drove south in a line. The highway rose and fell with the cliffs. Rain struck the windshield in uneven bursts. The ocean remained hidden beyond the fog, but the surf announced itself from below. It hit the rocks with a deep, heavy sound that came through the truck floor. Luis turned down the radio. He wanted to hear the hillside at the slide. Mud covered the southbound lane and half of the northbound shoulder. A cedar tree lay across the pavement with its roots exposed. Stones continued to fall from above, each one making a sharp click before it disappeared into the mud. The crew parked behind a line of cones. Ray walked the edge of the debris. "Loose material is still moving," he said. "We clear from the outside," and Luis checked the slope. The hillside had opened in 3 layers. Brown clay sat above dark rock. Beneath that, a seam of pale gravel cut across the face like an old scar. He pointed at it. "Water is coming through there." Ray looked. "Then we keep the machines light." They worked for 4 hours. The excavator lifted branches and deposited them beyond the shoulder. Luis and another worker named Cody used shovels to pull smaller stones away from the center line. Mud filled their boots. Rain softened the edges of every pile they made. At noon, Luis sat on the tailgate and opened the red cooler. He called Elena. She answered on the 4th ring. "Are you eating?" "I am looking at mango." "That is not what I asked." Luis smiled. A rock struck the hillside behind him. The sound traveled through the rain. Elena went quiet. "Was that close?" she asked. "Everything sounds close on this road. You should come home." "I will after the lane opens." She asked about the dog next door. Luis described the newspaper thief in detail. By the time the call ended, the rain had strengthened. The first strange sound came in the afternoon. Luis was operating the excavator when he heard a hollow knock beneath the bucket. He raised the arm. The bucket teeth had struck something solid under the mud. It was not rock. The sound had a flat metallic ring. Ray approached. "Pipe? Maybe." Luis moved the machine back and scraped around the spot with the bucket edge. Brown soil fell away. A strip of black pavement appeared beneath the slide. The old asphalt ran at an angle beneath the current road. Ray crouched and touched it with his glove. "This road is not supposed to be here." Luis looked down the slope. The visible section was wide enough for a single lane. It continued beneath the mud toward the cliff, then vanished under the active slide. Cody wiped rain from his goggles. "Old highway could be," Ray said. Luis shook his head. "The grade is wrong." The buried pavement sloped toward the ocean. The present highway ran higher and farther inland at that point. Ray called the county office. They found no record of an abandoned road beneath the section. The oldest map showed only the current alignment. The rain continued. Ray told the crew to cover the exposed asphalt with a tarp and stop digging until morning. Luis stayed behind to monitor the slope while the others moved equipment to a safer turnout. He sat in the cab of the excavator with the heater blowing against his knees. The hillside made small sounds. Pebbles clicked down the mud. Water ran through hidden channels. The cedar roots creaked as the soil shifted around them. Beneath those sounds, Luis heard a faint vibration. It came from the exposed pavement, a low, steady hum. He stepped out and stood beside the tarp. The hum continued. It sounded like an engine idling far below the road. Luis lifted the tarp. The buried asphalt was wet and dark. A thin line of water crossed it from the hillside and disappeared into a crack. The hum stopped. Luis replaced the tarp. At first light, the rain had weakened. Ray returned with a county engineer and 2 surveyors. They took measurements and compared them to old maps. The engineer said the road might have belonged to an earlier construction project, a temporary access road, a logging spur, something used before the current highway was widened. Luis asked why there was no record. The engineer looked toward the cliff. Records get lost. They resumed digging. The excavator uncovered a second stretch of pavement. It curved beneath the slide and ended at a concrete retaining wall. The wall had a steel door set into it. The door was only 3 feet high. Mud covered the handle. Cody took a step closer. "Who builds a door like that?" No one answered. Ray ordered them to clear the area by hand. Luis and Cody used shovels to remove the wet soil. The concrete wall extended farther than expected. It formed the side of a narrow structure buried beneath the roadway. They found a vent. Cold air moved through it. Luis felt the current against his cheek. It carried the smell of old wood, kerosene, and something sweet like dried apples. The county engineer called for a halt. He wanted structural inspection before anyone opened the door. Ray agreed. The crew moved back while a safety officer examined the wall. The door shifted on its hinges when the officer touched it. A dark gap opened below the road. From inside came a slow dripping sound. Then another sound answered. A chair moved across a floor. The scrape lasted only a moment. Luis looked at Cody. Cody's shovel slipped from his hand. The safety officer stepped away from the door. "Could be debris settling," he said. Ray told everyone to move uphill. They waited for an hour while the engineer called the county office. No one could identify the structure. A search through archived construction photographs produced a single image from the 1930s. It showed a work camp built along the coast during the original highway project. The photograph had been taken from above. Several small buildings stood beside a dirt road. A row of workers posed near a shed. In the corner, partly hidden by a tree, was a low concrete structure with a narrow door. The image was too blurred to show what stood inside. The caption listed the camp as temporary. The county office had no record of when it was removed. Ray decided to open the door. The rain had stopped. Fog pressed against the hillside. The ocean below remained invisible, but the surf rolled upward in slow, heavy bursts. Luis and Cody cleared the handle. The door opened inward. Cold air moved through the gap. Their flashlights entered first. The beam passed over a narrow corridor lined with wood planks. The planks were dark with age. Water dripped from the ceiling. A row of hooks held empty coats. The corridor continued beneath the road. On the floor lay a child's red rubber boot. Cody whispered, "That is not from the 30s. Ray stepped over it. The first room contained a table, 4 chairs, and a rusted stove. Tin cups rested beside the stove. One cup was clean enough to reflect the flashlight beam. Luis counted the chairs. There were 5. The 5th stood near the far wall facing the corridor. A calendar hung above the table. The paper had curled from dampness. The year printed across the top was recent. Luis moved closer. The last page showed a month that had ended only 6 weeks earlier. Under several dates, someone had drawn small black circles. The county engineer entered behind them and stopped at the calendar. "This cannot be original." No one replied. The room extended deeper. They found shelves of canned food with labels worn away, a stack of newspapers, a battery-powered lantern, and a mattress covered by a gray blanket. The mattress was still warm. Luis did not touch it. He held his hand above the fabric and felt a trace of heat rising through the damp air. A door stood at the end of the room. It was smaller than a normal door and had no handle on the outside. From behind it came a faint scratching sound. Not an animal, something dragging a hard object across the floor. Ray raised his hand. Everyone stopped. The scratching ended. The room became quiet enough for Luis to hear water moving inside the walls. Then a voice spoke from behind the door. "Is the road open?" The words were clear. Cody took one step backward. Ray answered, "Who is in there?" No reply. The county engineer reached for the door. Luis caught his arm. "We should leave." The engineer looked at him. "We need to know if someone is trapped." The door opened before anyone touched it. Beyond it was another corridor, this one sloping down toward the ocean. The walls narrowed until the flashlights could not reach the end. A line of wet footprints crossed the floor. They began inside the room and continued downhill. The prints were small, bare feet. Ray called for the safety officer. The radio produced only static. The engineer tried his phone. No service. From far below, a chair scraped across concrete. The sound rose through the passage. Luis felt it in his teeth. Ray ordered everyone back to the entrance. The crew moved quickly but did not run. Boots struck the wooden floor. Metal tools knocked against belts. The corridor seemed longer on the way out. The door to the first room stood open behind them. The fifth chair had moved. It now faced the entrance. Luis saw a dark mark on the seat. Water gathered there and dripped onto the floor. They reached daylight. A section of the hillside collapsed behind them. Mud poured across the exposed doorway, burying the concrete wall and the old asphalt in one heavy movement. The sound rolled down the slope and disappeared into the surf. The crew stood beneath the fog while the last stone settled. The county engineer called the incident a secondary slide. He said the structure was unstable and should be left buried. The county closed the lane for another 2 days and placed a concrete barrier near the edge. No report mentioned the voice. No report mentioned the warm mattress. Luis kept quiet until the following week, when a local woman arrived at the maintenance yard. She was in her 60s and drove a beige sedan with a cracked windshield. She asked for Ray. When he came outside, she handed him a photograph. It showed the same stretch of highway before the current road was built. The old construction camp stood beneath the cliff. The concrete structure was visible at the edge of the frame. 5 chairs sat outside the door. The woman pointed to the smallest one. "My uncle disappeared from that camp," she said. "They said he went into the ocean." Ray studied the photograph. "Why bring this to us?" She looked toward the coast. "Because my uncle was 8 years old." She left before Ray could ask her name. Luis returned to work. He cleared mud, repaired signs, and inspected drainage channels after every storm. He no longer liked working beneath active slopes. When water seeped through a wall, he listened before touching it. The crew eventually stopped talking about the buried road. The county paved over the area and removed the barrier. Tourists drove past without knowing what lay below. Luis knew. He also knew that the sound had not ended with the collapse. Sometimes when he worked alone, he heard a chair scrape beneath the pavement. It came through the ground as a faint vibration, followed by a soft stop. He never reported it. He began carrying a small folding chair in his truck. At every worksite, he placed it beside the equipment and kept it facing the road. If anyone moved it, Luis put it back before sunset. He said it helped him keep track of his tools. No one believed him. The coast holds its old roads under newer ones. A layer of asphalt can cover a path, but it cannot erase the reason people once used it. Beneath every repaired surface, something remains pressed into the ground. Luis still ties his boots twice each morning. Before climbing into the work truck, he checks the folding chair. If it faces the hillside, he turns it toward the highway. Then he starts the engine and waits for the ground to answer. Rebecca Hahn kept a blue pen clipped inside her patrol jacket. It was not issued by the department. Her father had given it to her before she entered the academy, telling her that a good pen could get a person through more trouble than a good speech. The pen had a cracked cap and a line of dried ink along the grip. Rebecca used it to write everything down: mileage, weather, license plates, names of people who needed directions. She wrote in small, neat letters that filled every corner of the page. Her patrol district covered a long section of Highway 1 between Monterey and the northern edge of Big Sur. During the day, she dealt with tourists who stopped in traffic lanes. cyclists who ignored warning signs, and drivers who thought a photograph was worth leaning over a guardrail. At night, the road belonged to other things. Rebecca worked the graveyard shift because she liked the quiet. She had a 12-year-old son named Aaron, who slept through most of the hours she was gone. Before leaving home, she warmed milk on the stove and wrote a note beside his cereal bowl. Back before the sun, she placed the note beneath the spoon so it would not blow away when he opened the window. On the road, Rebecca kept a thermos of black tea between the seats. Her partner had once told her that police officers were supposed to drink coffee. Rebecca said tea made fewer stains on paperwork. She drove a white patrol cruiser with a cracked plastic trim near the steering column. Whenever she turned left, the trim tapped against the dashboard. Tap, pause. Tap, tap. She had learned to ignore it. The night the voice returned, the weather report predicted light fog. The fog became heavy by midnight. It rolled in from the water and covered the highway in long strips. Rebecca reduced her speed and listened to the tires moving over damp pavement. The radio carried dispatch traffic from Monterey. Voices broke in and out as patrol units checked abandoned cars, fallen branches, and a stalled tour bus near a campground. Rebecca answered each call with her location. She kept the blue pen in her hand. At 1:15, she stopped at a turnout above the ocean. The wind had dropped. Without it, the coastline sounded larger. Surf struck the rocks below in slow bursts. Water moved through the drainage ditch beside the road. Somewhere in the trees, a branch rubbed against another branch with a dry, wooden squeak. Rebecca turned off the cruiser and waited. The radio hissed. She checked the windshield for moisture. The glass reflected her face in the red glow of the dashboard. Then a voice spoke. Unit 9, respond. Rebecca looked at the radio. The transmission had not come through dispatch. It was lower than normal, almost buried beneath static. She picked up the microphone. Unit, identify nothing, answered. Rebecca looked at the channel display. It showed the department's primary frequency. Channel 9 had been retired years earlier, after the county switched to a digital system. Older patrol cars still had the setting, but no one used it. The voice came again. Unit 9, respond to the vehicle. Rebecca glanced toward the road. No vehicle waited at the turnout. She changed the radio channel. Dispatch traffic returned immediately. A deputy near Carmel was asking for a tow truck. Another unit reported a deer in the lane. Rebecca switched back. The voice remained. Unit 9, respond to the vehicle. She pressed the transmit button. This is Officer Hahn. Identify yourself. The reply came without delay. Stay on the road. Rebecca wrote the words in her notebook. The transmission ended. She looked over the guardrail. Fog filled the space below. The ocean could not be seen, but the surf continued striking the rocks. Rebecca restarted the cruiser. She reported the transmission to dispatch. The dispatcher, a man named Clark, asked her to repeat the channel. Channel 9, she said. That channel is not in service. I know. Did someone patch into the system, maybe? Clark told her to return to the primary frequency and continue patrol. He said he would notify the communications supervisor. Rebecca drove south. The fog thickened around the headlights. The road narrowed between the cliff and the trees. Reflectors appeared at the edge of the lane and disappeared behind her. At the next bend, she heard a faint beeping through the cruiser's speaker. 3 short tones, a pause, 3 short tones, the voice returned. Vehicle ahead. No driver. Rebecca slowed. A pale shape appeared through the fog. It sat on the shoulder with its hazard lights flashing. The car was an older silver sedan angled toward the ocean. Rebecca pulled behind it and turned on her emergency lights. The sound of the surf rose beneath the idling engine. She took her flashlight and stepped outside. The sedan's driver door stood open. The interior light was on. A purse rested on the passenger seat. The keys were in the ignition. Rebecca swept the beam through the cabin. No blood, no broken glass, no sign of a collision. The radio inside the sedan played static. Rebecca leaned closer. A voice whispered from the speaker. Unit 9. She stepped away from the car. The cruiser radio answered from behind her. Do not walk to the edge. Rebecca turned toward the fog. The shoulder ended 10 feet ahead at a low barrier. Beyond it, the ground fell toward the ocean. She had not noticed how close she was standing to the drop. She backed toward the cruiser. The sedan's hazard lights continued blinking. Each flash revealed a little more of the road. Wet gravel, a bent reflector post. a line of footprints leading away from the driver's door. The footprints stopped at the barrier. Rebecca followed them with her flashlight. The last print contained seawater. She called dispatch. Clark answered at once. "I have an abandoned vehicle," Rebecca said. "Possible missing driver. Location," she gave the mile marker. "Stand by. Another unit is 20 minutes out." Rebecca looked at the sedan. The radio inside it clicked. A woman's voice said, "He went down." Rebecca opened the trunk. It contained a folded blanket, a tire iron, and 2 empty water bottles. She checked beneath the seats and around the rear tires. No sign of the driver. The fog moved across the road. For a moment, Rebecca saw a figure below the barrier. A person in a dark jacket stood halfway down the slope, facing the ocean. She raised the flashlight. The beam struck wet rock. The figure was gone. The cruiser radio spoke again. "Turn around." Rebecca lifted the microphone. "Who is transmitting?" The reply was softer. "You are not the first," Clark called through the primary channel. "Officer Hahn, your signal is dropping. Repeat your location." Rebecca switched frequencies. Clark's voice broke into fragments. She could hear only her own call sign and a burst of static. The cruiser engine began to idle unevenly. Rebecca looked at the fuel gauge, half a tank. The temperature gauge sat in the normal range. The dashboard lights flickered once, then steadied. She entered the sedan's license plate into the mobile computer. The vehicle belonged to a man named Thomas Bell. The registration listed an address in Salinas and an emergency contact named Miriam Bell. Rebecca started toward the barrier. The voice on Channel 9 returned. "Do not go down." She stopped. The surf struck the cliff below. The sound traveled upward through the fog and seemed to vibrate in the barrier under her hand. A second set of hazard lights appeared through the mist. They belonged to a dark SUV approaching from the north. The driver slowed beside the abandoned sedan and stopped. Rebecca stepped into the lane with her flashlight raised. The SUV rolled down its window. A man leaned toward her. "Is there a problem?" "Stay in the vehicle," Rebecca said. The man looked past her at the silver sedan. "Someone fall?" "Stay inside." He kept looking toward the barrier. The Channel 9 voice came through the cruiser speaker. "Do not let him leave." Rebecca placed one hand near her radio. The man shut off the SUV. He opened the door. Rebecca drew her weapon and pointed it toward the ground. "Do not get out." The man froze. Fog moved between them. Water dripped from the SUV's roof. The man's face remained mostly hidden beneath the hood of his jacket. Then he raised both hands. "I am trying to help." Rebecca heard another sound behind her. The silver sedan's rear door opened. She turned. No one stood beside it. The door swung slowly in the wind. The man in the SUV stepped out. Rebecca kept her weapon trained low. "Get back inside." He did not move. The Channel 9 voice came through the cruiser. "Officer Hahn, the road is behind you." Rebecca looked at the pavement. The fog had covered both directions. The emergency lights painted the mist red, then dark, then red again. The shoulder seemed narrower than before. The SUV man took one step toward the sedan. Rebecca raised her voice. "Stop." He stopped. The silver sedan's radio crackled. A child began crying through the speaker. The sound was faint. It came from inside the vehicle and from somewhere beyond the barrier at the same time. Rebecca's hand tightened around the flashlight. The SUV man looked toward the ocean. "Do you hear that?" he asked. Rebecca did not answer. The crying continued. Then a man shouted from below, "Help me!" The voice sounded like Thomas Bell. Rebecca knew the report would later say she had no reason to believe the voice belonged to him. At the time, it carried the roughness of a person calling from a distance. It rose through the fog and broke against the road. The SUV man moved toward the barrier. Rebecca grabbed his sleeve. He pulled away. "Someone is down there. You cannot see the slope." "I heard him." "So did." The voice called again. "Help me." The SUV man stepped closer. Rebecca hooked one arm around his chest and dragged him backward. His boots slipped on the gravel. He grabbed the barrier with both hands below them. Something struck the rock, a dull impact, then another. The silver sedan's hazard lights went dark. The fog opened for one brief second. A line of wet footprints crossed the lane behind Rebecca. They led from the sedan to the cruiser. No one stood at the end of them. The SUV man saw the prints. His breathing changed. Short pulls through his nose. His fingers slipped from the barrier. Rebecca pushed him toward the SUV. "Get inside." He did not argue. A patrol unit arrived from the north with lights flashing. The fog swallowed the cruiser until it was almost beside them. Two officers stepped out, followed by a highway service truck. The Channel 9 transmission stopped. The silver sedan's interior light went out. The missing driver, Thomas Bell, was found 2 days later at a motel in Monterey. He had no memory of leaving his car. He said he had seen a figure on the shoulder and believed it was his wife. His wife had died 3 years earlier. The SUV man was released after giving his statement. He told investigators he had heard someone calling from below the road. He refused to describe the voice. The official report listed the incident as a welfare check, complicated by weather and poor visibility. Channel 9 was checked by the communications supervisor. The old frequency contained no recording. There was no evidence of an outside transmission. The department replaced the radio in Rebecca's cruiser, but the new unit produced the same static in the same stretch of road. Rebecca returned to patrol after a week away. She kept her blue pen clipped inside her jacket. She continued writing every detail. She stopped using the word voice. Instead, she wrote transmission. The next time she passed the mile marker, daylight filled the road. The ocean was visible below. Pelicans moved over the water. A family had parked near the turnout and was eating sandwiches beside a rental car. Nothing waited by the barrier. Rebecca slowed anyway. The cruiser speaker clicked 3 tones. A pause, 3 tones. She switched off the radio. The sound continued through the dashboard. Rebecca pulled into the turnout and sat with both hands on the wheel. She could hear the tires of passing cars. She could hear gulls and wind. She could hear the small tap in the steering column whenever she turned left. Then, beneath all of it, a voice spoke through the silent speaker. Unit 9, respond. Rebecca did not look toward the ocean. She reached under the seat and removed the blue pen. With the engine still running, she wrote the time in her notebook. Then she placed the notebook face down. People who patrol isolated roads learn that distance changes the meaning of a voice. A call from a nearby shoulder can sound far away. A sound from below can seem close enough to touch. The radio does not tell you where a person is. It only proves that someone, somewhere, is speaking. Rebecca still works the coast, but she no longer answers unidentified transmissions. When the speaker clicks after midnight, she pulls over in a populated area, turns off the cruiser, and waits for the static to fade. Before driving again, she checks the passenger seat. Then she checks the back seat. The last thing she does is place the blue pen on the dashboard pointed toward the road. Peter Cole repaired old radios for a living, although he called it a hobby whenever someone asked. His workshop occupied the back room of their apartment in San Jose. Shelves covered the walls from floor to ceiling. Every shelf held a wooden cabinet, a bundle of wires, or a small paper label written in Peter's narrow handwriting. He liked machines that had outlived their owners. Anna, his wife, worked as a freelance illustrator. She drew maps for children's books, including forests that had too many trees and houses that were always visible from the road. She kept pencils in a ceramic bowl shaped like a blue fish. The fish had one missing eye. They had been married for 6 years. Peter measured time by repair jobs. Anna measured it by deadlines, their apartment filled with quiet routines. He made coffee before sunrise. She opened the blinds only halfway because full morning light made her headaches worse. On weekends, they drove north along Highway 1. Peter took photographs of abandoned service stations. Anna sketched the shapes of old fences and telephone poles. They did not travel far from the road. Neither enjoyed hiking, but both liked seeing places that had been left behind. In late autumn, they rented a small house near the coast for 6 weeks. Anna had accepted a book project that required uninterrupted work. Peter wanted a quieter place for his radio equipment. The house stood behind a line of cypress trees near a private road outside Cambria. A wooden sign at the entrance read Cypress Rest. The letters were faded and partly covered by lichen. The owner, a man named Howard, met them at the gate. He was tall, thin, and wore a wool cap pulled low over his forehead. He handed Peter a ring of keys and pointed toward the house. "Keep the back windows closed at night," Howard said. Anna glanced toward the trees. "Why, wind? There is no wind right now." Howard looked behind her. Not every night is the same. The house was small and square, with a red roof and a porch facing the cypress grove. Beyond the trees, the land fell toward the ocean. The coast was not visible from the front yard. The only view was the dark wall of branches. Inside, the house smelled of dust, cedar, and old paint. A narrow hallway led from the front door to a living room with a stone fireplace. The kitchen had yellow cabinets and a refrigerator that hummed too loudly. Anna chose the bedroom facing inland. Peter chose the room with the largest window. "Of course you did," she said. "It has better light. It faces a tree. It faces many trees." Peter unpacked his radios on the dining table. Anna arranged her pencils in the blue fish and placed her sketchbook beside the window. That evening they ate soup from bowls they had brought from home. Outside, cypress branches rubbed against one another. The sound moved along the roof in slow waves. Peter tuned an old tabletop radio he had bought at an estate sale. The speaker produced a soft hiss, then a weather report from San Luis Obispo. The announcer warned of heavy fog along the coastal roads. Anna drew the house from memory. She kept adding a second window to the front wall. "There are only 3, Peter said. "I know. Then why did you draw 4? Anna looked at the page. "I thought I saw one." Peter walked to the window. The cypress grove stood in the yard. No 4th window showed through the branches. They went to bed early. At 2:20 in the morning, Peter heard a vehicle approaching the house. The sound came first as a low vibration beneath the floor tires rolled over gravel. An engine climbed slightly, then settled into a steady idle. Peter opened his eyes. The bedroom was dark. Anna slept beside him with one hand beneath her cheek. The headlights appeared through the curtains. 2 yellow beams crossed the room and moved across the ceiling. Peter sat up. The engine continued running outside. He walked to the window and lifted one corner of the curtain. The beams were visible between the cypress trunks. They stopped at the same place near the center of the grove, where no road existed. Peter waited for the vehicle to turn. It did not. After several minutes, the engine stopped. The headlights remained. Peter stepped away from the window. The beams vanished. In the morning, he found no tire tracks in the yard. The gravel near the porch was undisturbed. Anna said she had heard nothing. "It was probably a car on the private road," she said. "The road does not come this far. Maybe the sound carried." Peter did not argue. That afternoon, Anna added another window to her drawing. The second night, the vehicle came at 2:20. The sound traveled from the back of the house this time. It passed behind the kitchen, then moved through the grove. Peter heard gravel beneath the tires, though the ground behind the house was covered in grass. He remained in bed. The headlights entered through the curtains. They crossed the ceiling. A thin branch cast a moving shadow over the wall. Anna woke. "What is that car where outside?" She sat up and listened. The engine idled. Anna reached for her robe. Peter caught her wrist. "Wait," the headlights went out. A moment later, someone knocked on the back door. One knock. Then another. Anna held her breath. Peter looked down the hallway. The back door stood at the far end beyond the kitchen. Its glass panel showed only darkness. A third knock came. Peter did not move. The sound stopped. He stayed awake until morning. The following day, he asked Howard about the lights. The owner met them at the house with a toolbox. He checked a leaking faucet and tightened a loose hinge on the pantry door. "People drive through the grove?" Peter asked. Howard put the screwdriver away. "There is no drive through the grove. We heard a vehicle." "You heard something." Headlights came through the trees. Howard looked toward the front windows. "Do not open the back curtains after dark." Anna watched him. "Has this happened before?" Howard's face remained still. "Old houses make sounds." "That was not the house," Peter said. Howard picked up his toolbox. "Stay away from the grove at night." He left before they could ask more. Peter spent the afternoon examining the property map. The house sat at the end of a private road that curved inland and stopped at a locked gate. Behind the cypress grove, the land dropped sharply toward the ocean. No driveways crossed the trees. No structures appeared on the county survey. Anna continued working, but her drawings changed. She began sketching the grove from different angles. In every picture, a dark shape appeared among the branches. Sometimes it looked like a house. Sometimes it looked like the front of a car. She did not remember drawing it. On the 4th night, Peter placed a tape recorder on the kitchen counter. He set it to record continuously. At 2:20, the engine arrived. This time, the sound came from the front yard. Tires rolled over gravel. The headlights moved between the trees and stopped near the same invisible point. Peter and Anna stood together in the hallway. The engine idled. A faint ticking came from the walls. The refrigerator clicked off. The house became quiet except for the vehicle. Anna whispered, "Why does it stop there?" Peter watched the headlights. "I do not know." The back door handle moved, not quickly. The metal turned downward and returned to its original position. Anna took Peter's hand. The headlights went out. A figure crossed the grove. It moved from left to right between the trees. Peter saw the pale shape of a face, then the dark line of a coat. The figure stopped. It turned toward the house. Peter stepped backward. The tape recorder clicked on the counter. A voice came through the tiny speaker. "Do not open the door." Peter had not heard the voice in the room. The recording continued for another minute. It captured the engine, the handle, and a second voice beneath the first. Not yet. The vehicle departed without starting. The next morning, the yard was covered in wet leaves. In the center of the grove, Anna found a shallow track pressed into the soil. It was not a tire mark. It consisted of two parallel lines, each about the width of a shoe, running from the trees to the back of the house. They stopped beneath the kitchen window. Peter called Howard. Howard arrived carrying a shovel. He stood over the marks without touching them. "Has anyone else rented this house?" Anna asked. "Of course. Did they hear the vehicle?" Howard looked toward the grove. "Some did. What happened to them?" "They left." "Why?" "They did not like the place." Howard dug into the soil beside the track. He lifted a small object from the ground, a metal key. It was rusted along the teeth. He handed it to Peter. "This belongs to the old house." "What old house?" Howard pointed beyond the cypress. "There was a house here before the road was moved." Peter unfolded the property map. "There is nothing on the survey. Not anymore." Howard said the original cottage had burned before he bought the land. The fire destroyed the interior, but the stone foundation remained. During the reconstruction, the builders moved the access road and planted the cypress trees to block the view of the ocean. "Why did they move the road?" Peter asked. Howard closed his hand around the shovel. "People kept stopping here." "Who?" "Drivers." He refused to say more. That night, Peter and Anna moved a table against the back door. They turned off every light except the lamp in the living room. Peter kept the old radio beside him. Anna sat with her sketchbook closed on her knees. The engine arrived at 2:20. It stopped in the grove. The headlights shone through the branches. Peter switched on the tape recorder. The device began recording. The kitchen window fogged from the inside. A line appeared in the moisture. It began as a single vertical mark, then another crossed it. A rough rectangle formed on the glass, a window. Beyond it, the headlights were visible. The shape in the fog looked into the kitchen from the other side. Anna stood, the back door handle moved. Peter held her arm. The engine shut off. The headlights remained. A sound came from the front of the house. The porch boards creaked under a slow, careful step. Then another someone walked around the house. The floor vibrated near the living room wall. The stone fireplace gave a soft pop as the heat changed. Peter and Anna stood in the hallway. The footsteps stopped outside the bedroom window. A shadow crossed the curtain. It had the shape of a person carrying something long. The old radio turned on by itself. Static filled the room. A voice spoke through it. "Peter." He stared at the radio. Anna's fingers closed around his sleeve. The voice continued. "Anna." The headlights vanished. The room went dark. Something struck the back door hard enough to shake the table. Peter pulled Anna toward the front entrance. They moved through the living room without turning on the lights. The front door opened into the yard. The cypress grove stood black against the sky. A vehicle idled among the trees. The headlights were on again, facing the house. Peter could see the driver's seat through the branches. No one sat there. The engine revved once. The car rolled forward. It moved between the trees without disturbing a branch. The beams swept over the porch, the stone path, and the side of the house. Peter saw a pale hand resting on the steering wheel. The vehicle stopped at the edge of the yard. A woman stepped out. She wore a long coat. Her hair covered her face. She carried a wooden chair in both hands. Anna made a sound behind Peter. The woman walked toward the house. Peter backed into the doorway. The chair's legs dragged across the ground. Scrape, stop, scrape, stop. The woman reached the porch and placed the chair beside the front door. She turned it toward the ocean, though the ocean could not be seen through the cypress. Then she walked back to the vehicle. Peter watched her enter the driver's side. The headlights went out. No engine noise followed. The car was gone. The chair remained. Peter and Anna left the house before dawn. They drove inland and checked into a motel near Paso Robles. Neither slept. At noon, Peter returned with Howard and 2 deputies. The chair was still on the porch. It was wet from the morning fog. No fingerprints were found on the wood. The tire marks ended at the first line of cypress trees. Beyond that, the soil was untouched. The county inspected the property. They found the remains of an old foundation beneath the grove. A shallow stone room had been sealed under the ground. Inside were fragments of glass, a rusted lantern, and a metal plate from a vehicle. The plate belonged to a car reported missing in the 1960s. No one connected it to the house. Howard sold the property 6 months later. Peter and Anna never returned to the coast for another rental. They moved inland, where their windows faced a parking lot, and the nearest cypress stood behind a shopping center. Anna stopped drawing houses with windows on every wall. She began leaving the back page of each sketchbook. Blank Peter stopped repairing radios. He said the work had become too expensive. At night they kept the curtains closed. If headlights crossed the bedroom ceiling, Peter checked the street only after the light had gone. They kept one chair in the living room. It faced the front door. The coast is full of houses that seem empty until the fog fills their windows. Roads stop where maps say they should continue. Trees hide foundations, paths, and places where people once waited for something to arrive. Peter and Anna learned that a house can keep a view even after the road disappears. Every evening before bed, Anna turns the living room chair toward the door. Every morning, Peter finds it facing the windows. He never moves it back until the sun is fully up. Grant Ellis woke before his alarm because Moss was scratching at the back door. The sound came in short bursts. 3 scrapes, a pause, 3 more. Grant opened one eye and listened to the house. The refrigerator hummed in the kitchen. Rain tapped against the bedroom window. A truck moved along the highway beyond the trees. Moss scratched again. Grant got out of bed and pulled on his work pants. The dog waited on the porch, a brown and white cattle dog with one torn ear and a habit of carrying socks from room to room. He dropped a wet sock at Grant's feet. "You already took one," Grant said. Moss looked toward the trees. Grant filled the dog's bowl and started coffee. He always drank the first cup standing beside the sink. Moss ate in small bites, carrying each mouthful away from the bowl before swallowing. They had lived together for 5 years in a rented cabin near the northern edge of Big Sur. Grant repaired trail signs for the state park and spent his weekends hiking roads that had been abandoned, moved, or covered by landslides. Moss went everywhere with him. The dog wore a red collar with a brass tag. Grant had engraved his phone number on one side and the words "Bring him home" on the other. That morning, Grant planned to check a trail above the coast. A winter storm had damaged several signs. He packed a thermos, 2 sandwiches, a rain jacket, and a small handheld recorder he used to document work conditions. Moss followed him around the kitchen. Grant clipped the red leash to his collar. The dog pulled toward the back steps. "Not yet." Moss sat down. Grant smiled and scratched the torn ear. "Give me 5 minutes." He meant to leave the leash on during the drive. Instead, when he reached the truck, Moss slipped from his grip and ran toward the trees. Grant called him once. Moss stopped near the edge of the yard. He looked back. Then he disappeared beneath the redwoods. Grant followed on foot. The ground was wet with rain. Leaves covered the old service path behind the cabin. Water moved through the ditch beside it, carrying twigs and pieces of bark. Moss, no answer. Grant heard the dog's collar bell somewhere ahead. The sound moved deeper into the trees. Grant stepped over a fallen branch and called again. The bell rang once, then it stopped. He searched for 2 hours. He found the wet sock near a cedar stump. He found paw prints beside a muddy puddle. He found a patch of fur caught on a blackberry branch. He did not find Moss by noon. The rain had ended. Fog remained between the trunks. The forest held a damp, steady quiet. Water dripped from branches long after the clouds had passed. Grant returned to the cabin and called the county shelter. He called nearby park offices. He posted a photograph of Moss on the local message board and drove to the gas station near the highway to print flyers. The attendant recognized the dog. "He was with you yesterday," she said, "and this morning I saw him near the trailhead." "What time?" She looked toward the register. Before sunrise, maybe. Grant had not taken Moss to the trailhead that morning. He asked if the dog had been alone. The attendant shook her head. There was a truck parked by the trees. What kind? She thought for a moment. Old one. Gray, I think. Grant returned to the forest before dark. He carried a flashlight and the recorder. He called Moss at every bend. The only answer was water moving through the undergrowth. At the back of the cabin, he found a line of paw prints leading away from the house. They crossed his own footprints from the morning and continued toward a slope he had never explored. The prints ended beside a concrete post. The post stood 4 feet high and leaned toward the trees. Moss's red collar hung from the top. Grant stopped breathing for a moment. He reached for the collar. It was wet and cold. The brass tag had been turned around. The words on the back faced the forest, "Bring him home." Grant looked uphill. A narrow path climbed between the redwoods. He knew the area well enough to recognize that it should lead to an old fire road, but the road had been closed after a landslide decades earlier. He called Moss one more time. Something answered from above. Not a bark, a short electronic beep. Grant raised the recorder. The beep came again. He climbed. The trail was steep and covered in wet needles. Fog gathered around the trunks. The farther he went, the less he heard from the highway. Soon the road noise disappeared entirely. Only the creek remained and the beeping. Grant reached a flat section of ground where the trees opened. An old metal mile marker stood in the center. The sign read 118. There was no road around it. The ground beneath the marker was covered in moss and roots. No pavement showed through the leaves. No tire tracks crossed the clearing. The marker leaned slightly, its white paint flaking away. Grant had seen old markers before. Most had been left behind after roads were rerouted, but they were usually near the abandoned pavement. This one stood deep in the forest. Moss's collar lay at its base beside. It was a small black recorder. Grant recognized the model. It belonged to the Park Service. He picked it up and pressed the power button. Static filled the clearing. Then a man's voice said, "We are past the marker." The recording ended. Grant looked at the screen. The device showed no date. He played it again, the same voice. "We are past the marker." A second voice answered in the background. "Do you hear that?" The recording stopped. Grant searched the ground around the marker. He found a rusted bolt, a length of blue rope, and a shallow depression beneath the ferns. The depression was shaped like a footprint. It was too long to belong to Moss. Grant returned to the cabin and called the park office. A ranger named Caleb met him at the trailhead before dawn. Caleb listened to the recording with one hand resting on the hood of his truck. "That recorder is old," he said. "It was out there, could have been lost years ago." The voice mentions the marker. Caleb looked toward the forest. Mark 118 used to be along the old highway. Where was the highway? Closer to the ocean. The road was moved after the ridge failed. How long ago? Before my time. Do you know what happened to the crew? Caleb did not answer immediately. 3 men went missing during a survey project in the 70s. Their truck was found near the old alignment. The county called it an accident. No bodies. Grant played the recording again. The voice repeated the sentence. "We are past the marker." Caleb listened until the static ended. "Do not go up there alone," he said. Grant asked if he could search the area. "Not without a team. My dog is up there." Caleb's jaw tightened. "I know. They organized a search with 4 rangers and 2 volunteers. They entered the forest after sunrise, carrying radios, blankets, and tracking dogs. Moss had left no fresh prints. The search team found the old marker within an hour. The black recorder still lay at its base, though Grant had taken it home the night before. He had left it on the kitchen table. Grant checked his backpack. The recorder sat inside the front pocket. The ranger who found the second device did not touch it. Caleb photographed it first. When he pressed the button, a woman's voice came through. "Do not answer him." The search team went quiet. A sound moved through the trees. A collar bell. One clear ring, then another farther away. The tracking dogs pulled toward the slope beyond the marker. Their handlers struggled to hold them back. The animals whined and kept their noses low. Grant called Moss. A bark answered. It sounded close. Grant took 1 step forward. Caleb grabbed his shoulder. "Wait." The bark came again. This time, it came from beneath the ground. The soil under the marker shifted slightly. Ferns trembled. A hollow space opened beneath the roots and released a breath of cold air. The dogs began barking. Caleb ordered everyone back. The ground collapsed in a narrow line, revealing a strip of old pavement below. It was black and wet, running beneath the forest at a steep angle. The opening widened. A concrete wall appeared beneath the roots. A doorway stood in the wall, half buried by mud. Grant heard moss scratching on the other side, 3 scrapes. Apahi moved toward the opening. Caleb blocked him. The scratching stopped. A man's voice came through the soil. Grant. The sound was muffled, but the name was clear. Grant looked at the others. No one spoke. The voice continued. He is waiting. Grant's hands closed around the red collar in his pocket. Caleb told the team to retreat and call for excavation equipment. No one argued. They marked the ground with orange tape and returned to the trailhead. The equipment arrived that afternoon. By then, the opening had closed. The pavement was gone. The concrete wall was gone. Only the metal marker remained, standing in the moss. The county searched the area for 2 days. They found no buried structure, no room, and no dog. The black recorder produced different sounds each time it was played. Sometimes it contained a man's voice. Sometimes a woman's. Once, it recorded Grant calling Moss from the forest. He had never made that call. The official report listed the case as an unresolved animal disappearance and a possible abandoned road feature disturbed by erosion. Grant stopped reading reports after that. He kept searching for Moss until spring. He left food near the tree line and placed the dog's bed beneath the porch. He woke at night whenever branches tapped against the roof. Moss did not return. The brass tag from the collar remained in Grant's pocket. He rubbed it between his fingers whenever he drove near the coast. The metal had worn smooth around the words, "Bring him home." Months later, Grant found a new recording on the device. It appeared without a file name. He played it once rain moved through the background. A dog breathed close to the microphone. Then Moss barked. A man answered from farther away. "We are past the marker." Grant turned off the recorder. He did not play it again. He moved inland and took a job repairing signs near a dry valley. He stopped hiking alone. He avoided places where road signs stood without roads. When he saw a concrete post in the trees, he kept walking. The forest does not need a trail to remember where people have gone. Old roads remain under roots and mud, waiting for water to uncover a straight line through the ground. Sometimes the only evidence left behind is a marker, a recording, or the sound of a familiar animal calling from somewhere no one can reach. Grant still carries a handheld recorder in his truck. He never turns it on. Before sunrise, he places it on the dashboard with the screen facing down. Then he checks the back seat, even though he knows it is empty. Only after that does he start the engine. And every time the truck passes a roadside marker, Grant lowers the volume of the radio and listens for a collar bell beneath the tires.